We're hanging out in the lobby here at DICE headquarters in Stockholm, and we've caught up with Patrick, who's the, well, I guess the man in charge of Battlefield 3. So we've played a bit of multiplayer today, but of course I'm here to ask you a little bit about the game as a whole and about the single player and about the whole Battlefield experience. And first of all, what's it like going back to sort of the main series now? Finally, after so many years, we get Battlefield 3.
It's extremely exciting for the whole studio. Actually, you know, we were really proud with the Battlefield 2, and we've been actually designing and working with that game ever since we released it. Then, of course, we built all the Bad Company games in the meantime, but now we're back, finally back to building the next big Battlefield game. So it's very exciting.
And at the core of that and the foundation, of course, is Frostbite 2. Could you tell us a little bit about the work with Frostbite 2 and your objectives as you set out to start creating that?
Well, the Frostbite 2 engine is, of course, a magnificent piece of software. You know, you can see when you see it that it actually makes a difference on how the game looks and plays and feels. The core of the engine, though, is based on the design for Battlefield 3. So we built the game based on our needs to move Battlefield into the next generation. So we haven't wasted any energy on building stuff that we're not using. So everything from lighting to destruction to audio, everything is integrated in the design of Battlefield 3.
Speaking of that, I think everyone who's seen the first stuff that you put out is just, you know, we've been gobsmacked by the graphics and of course the sound is always on top level when it comes to DICE. That's one of your hallmarks. But could you tell us a little bit about, because we've seen it on PC, but you know, are the consoles really capable of you know, this kind of graphical level?
Well, that's the question we asked ourselves when we started to build this as well. You know, what happens if we kind of set the goal on a PC and then try to kind of push that into the consoles? And that was a huge challenge for us, but we actually designed the whole engine to work for all the platforms. So the goal for us is actually to create the same experience on all the platforms. Of course, there are technical limitations that you can't just ignore. So we will have fewer players, for instance, in multiplayer for the consoles, but in general the goal is to create the same experience. We're using the same animation system, the same lighting system, the sound will be the same. You know, everything is designed to work on all platforms, but in general, you know, of course something needs to give, and in this case it's mostly the player count.
So in terms of what you wanted to sort of create with the campaign and with the single player experience, of course it's very separate from the multiplayer, but sort of trying to instill that Battlefield feel into it as well, and keeping it separate from Bad Company, which has its own taste and feel. What were your sort of objectives when you set out with that?
Well, first of all, like you said, it's not Bad Company, so all the characters and the stories from that game is not a part of Battlefield 3. So again, we have not done a narrative-driven single player for the core Battlefield series before. So we actually had a clean slate when we started, which was very exciting. So the first thing we set out to do was, you know, create the right style and tone. If you look at Battlefield 2, for instance, the goal with that game was to create an authentic experience. And you can say whatever you like about that today, looking back at a game from 2006. But in general, the authenticity of Battlefield 2 is kind of the core of what Battlefield 3 is all about. We wanted to feel like a mature game, an authentic game, and have all the qualities that a next generation game should have.
So in terms of storytelling, you know, will it be like crazy twists and turns all the way, or will you keep it more like a realistic scenario for a military mission?
Again, I think the authenticity is very important for us. We want it to be plausible, we want it to be exciting, of course, but you know, I don't think we can see any resemblance to what others are doing. Well, of course, if you try really hard, you can probably say that, oh, you're doing that and everyone else is doing this. But we have our own goals on what we want it to be. We want to use the core of Battlefield stands for when it comes to using vehicles, infantry. You know, we have the whole light and dark gameplay that we added with the Frostbite 2 engine. We have the big open maps, and we have the super tight urban environments as well. So our goal is, of course, to create a very varied experience, but also staying away from, you know, political or religious controversy, because that's not something we're interested in. We're here to create entertainment, not controversy.
You sort of stepped into that a little bit with Medal of Honor, I guess, and you want to stay away from it.
Yeah, that was DICE didn't build the core of that game, so we weren't really involved in the core design of that game. DICE has always tried to stay away from real conflicts, for instance, because of those reasons. Because there is no fun and controversy doesn't have to be married. You can create a great game just by having a high quality, not by controversy.
So if we take a look at the first part of the single player that you showed off, how dynamic is that? Is it very tight scripted and sort of putting the player in a corridor where he's following the action, or is there like any sort of freedom and anywhere that's really dynamic?
Yes, of course. There are parts where it's more open, and there are parts where it's more linear, and that is again to create a dramatic arc and drive the narrative forward. There's no reason to if it's fun to do a linear gameplay, then we do that. If it's fun to do sandbox, then we do that. We have the possibility to do both in Battlefield. Again, it's not a multiplayer bot match either, so you don't want it to be a bad copy of our multiplayer. You want it to be a very separate experience from the multiplayer, and we want different types of people to be able to enjoy themselves with different types of gameplay. And then in the middle you have the co-op, which is a two-player co-op with a very clear mission structure, but with a lot of focus on the sandbox, and I think that's a very good complement to the multiplayer and the single player.
So how do you design the co-op? Is it based around a multiplayer map or a single player map, or is it something completely different?
It's inspired by both, but it's unique. So we are building unique maps, but some maps in single player and multiplayer are really cool. So we want to kind of take parts of that and maybe do a cross section that is unique to the co-op. But we don't want to just reuse an old map and say that, oh, this is new, because it's not. So we have a separate team building all the co-op missions. Is
there objective based with different kinds of objectives, or is it sort of a similar mold for all the co-op missions?
They all have separate objectives, so they are separate missions, but they all coexist in the same universe. They actually string together in a interesting way that I won't go into detail right now, but they have separate objectives, and they make good use of both infantry and vehicle experiences.
And of course, I think everyone's packing up to go to E3. How excited are you to sort of show Battlefield 3 to the world at E3, at the big stage this year?
I'm very excited. I think we have something that is quite different and quite unique, and I'm looking forward quite a lot to be able to show this to the world.
And I think I just unlocked an achievement, as I didn't mention COD through the entire interview. Thank you very much, Patrick, for your time.
Thank you.